we'll do a 2000 one, and we'll just go through the behaviors that I have seen and witnessed, and over the board when I've witnessed them playing, they are awesome. I'm really impressed with them. So really, my generalization of the 2000 pluses, and when I say 2000 pluses, it's anybody over 2000. I'm not going to do a separate one for like 2100 or 2200. That's my first point. So the 2000s, they use the basics of chess very, very well. Have a look at any games. We're looking at this game now. It started, but we'll talk about the games when we finish doing our narration and generalization of the types of behaviors of a 2000 plus. So they use the basics very, very well. So when we're talking basics of chess, there's only a certain amount of moves you can make on the board of chess in terms of developing pieces, etc. It's the coordination and how you use those moves that is different to everybody else that you will play against, and how they will play against you, how they will respond against you. There's trillions and billions and millions of ways of, responding and maneuvering on the board, but there's only a certain amount of ways the pieces can move on the board. That part is factual. That part cannot be changed. So understanding the answer to chess is that, yes, I know that a knight can move this way. I know a bishop can move that way. It can't suddenly change and start moving sideways, the bishop. It can't suddenly change the knight and start moving horizontally and then backward and moving forward directly. It can't do that. The queen can move anywhere it wants to move, obviously. The rooks can't suddenly start moving diagonally. The king can't suddenly start moving two spaces, and that type of thing. So there's limitations to the movements of the pieces on the board. That is set in stone. That is the reality of chess. So when we say the basics of chess, the 2000 pluses, like the 1900s, play basic chess. They play it better than the 1900s, so it's very, very well. The 1900s play it well, but not excellently in a sense. The 2000s, you would say, well, probably say play the basics excellently. And then they have this skill of being able to pull out moves from what seem like nowhere. But as we've just mentioned, the pieces can only do certain things and move in certain ways. So it is really about how you have given them those positions. That's what makes the difference. They will take advantage of the opportunity that you have given to them, because they are humans. They're playing basic chess and they're waiting to find those openings that you think are not openings. They're looking at those advantages that you think aren't advantages, and they're taking advantage of those. They're not creating a different positional maneuverability of that piece. They're not creating extra squares on the board. So in a nutshell, they're not creating any kind of magical situation that you can't respond to and you can't develop and work against and gain advantages in. It's the key thing. Again, it's why I didn't want to do the 2000s, but it is an interesting fact of you can beat 2000 plus players. They are not gods. The 2000s definitely understand the position on the board, and they understand the position on the board better than a 1900. What tends to happen is they're usually 2 or 3 moves ahead of, say, a 1900, which is obviously the rating level below it. And if you keep going further down, 1800, 1700, you could use that sort of logic in terms of, okay, if they're like 2 or 3 moves ahead of a 1900, they're probably like 3 or 4 moves ahead of an 1800, and so on and so forth. Doesn't always dictate that way, because the problems they do have as 2000 players, 2000 plus players, is they can really get too arty. They really can. and bit of showboating because they feel that because they're potentially higher if they're playing a lower rated player, they start to kind of showboat the position. But as we've mentioned earlier on, they're not creating anything special for the pieces. The pieces can only move in certain ways. There's only a certain amount of spaces on the board. So if their opponent is actually taking advantage of those key spaces, key pieces, the key areas around the king, the weak areas around the king, spaces, etc., then, and if they're not blocking that off, then they're succumbing to the opponent's answer to chess. They can suffer, I think, based on the games that I've watched, they can suffer from being very, very reckless. Yeah, there's being too arty, which isn't reckless because they're styling it out. They know that they think they've got some sort of advantage, but they're putting a bit too much style in there when they could have actually maybe finished it off a little bit earlier or gained an advantage a little bit earlier on. But then you've got the recklessness whereby they are so overconfident that they're just going for weird looking tactics just to kind of throw the opponent off, sacrificing the piece, and it might look good, and for the next two moves they're in some sort of advantage, but then when you look at it you think, well, what is that? So in essence, that's the 2000 pluses looking at that kind of understanding psychological behaviors. And I'm going to dive in now and look at these games that we're observing as part of the behaviors, and let's see if they fall into any of it at all in any way, shape. We're talking mainly, I'm looking for the problems here. The positives are they'll play basics well, which is, if they're going to do that, then that's fine. We will see that in the game. But let's have a look at the too arty and the recklessness and leaving holes in their back end so that the opponent can take advantage. Okay, so we're in. That's quite a lot for the 2000, but hey. So white's here. What have we got? No pieces taken off the board at the minute. So the white is 2300 and the black is 2003. So obviously the 2300 will be saying there's no way major winning. But let's see how they run the basics properly first as a positive. This pawn is protected by the bishop, and he's slowly pushing these pawns up, inching these up. As you can see, they can't create anything special. I mean, this bishop's blocked in by this pawn here. Is it looking for this bishop to come here? I think that's why that pawn's moved, because it's going to get a rook off the board if he doesn't move the rook or move the queen. So basic chess, simple X-ray, simple X-ray or pinning, whichever way you want to look at it. I think it's more pinning, isn't it? Because it's not X-raying through a piece. Although it is X-raying through a piece, it would be the queen if it got there. So that's what we think they're looking for. Does the 2000 see that, or are they going to go for an attack that they think is going to give them better position? I don't think the timing would be right, but let's have a look. Could bring the bishop here, but the knight is here. The knight can take, queen can take, he'll still fall into that. So I think moving the rook or the queen, one of those, is going to be a key thing. This is a rapid game, so it's a 25-minute, 10-second game. It does give us time to actually do a bit of narration in it. What else is there? It's always just being mindful for myself, as I've been doing my own generalizations of things. Yes, really appreciate the 2000 pluses when they're playing the games over the board. Love watching them. They are like the monsters of chess, when you see them actually playing. And I look at the simplification after it all. After the dust settles, I just look at the games and I go, that was so simple, yet it was really intense. It's a different look at when you're looking at, say, the 1600s or the 1400s or the 1100s. It's a different kind of take. I do like watching the 1400s and the 1800 type games because they a bit more kind of, they are exciting because it's more my level, you know. It feels a little bit more kind of palpable. So the oh no, they didn't. They fell for it. Damn, they didn't even see it while we're talking away. Well, you can't see everything, can you? I suppose. And it's only a piece. It's a piece for a piece, isn't it? We keep saying just because you've lost the rook doesn't mean you've lost the game at all. But, you know, sometimes it does help having the double rooks. But if you can't get the rooks in the good position to do what they're supposed to do, then you may as well not have the doubled rooks, because the rooks are kind of not very flexible pieces. Just look at everything's kind of jammed down at the minute, so the rooks aren't really getting any play. It's going to be probably looking to try and blast open these pawns, make some space. He's already eyeing up this bishop here that's got no protection on it. Little things like this. These are the small things that we talked about earlier in terms of the difference between like the 1900 and the 2000 pluses, is that they try and get one step ahead or two steps ahead of the gameplay. And it's as simple as that. They're not creating anything new or special in the game. They're not doing magic stuff. If you break it down, you can kind of see what it is that they're attempting to do. It is simple, basic chess, but it's being utilized. That's the difference, you know? And it's appropriately looking at the board. I mean, that looks so clean and obvious to me. We can always think, well, what's that move for? Look a little bit deeper and you find the answers, really. I'm sure I was talking about something before I interrupted myself, but we'll come back to it. Yes, it was the timing, wasn't it? Yeah, the difference between the 1900 and the 2000 is they're always kind of ahead of the game in a sense. That's what it seems like in the games. They give the opponent something to think about as well. Things are like obvious, but I mean, obviously that bishop attacking here seemed obvious to me, but obviously they didn't take that. So it gave them something to think about in terms of having to take action to take the bishop off the board. Doesn't improve their position. So they've still not moved the bishop out of the way. Doesn't look like they've seen that this is potentially happening. It might be a long way off, obviously, so they might be trying to think now, how do we get rid of this knight to then get this knight or something, you know? It may be not that because the bishop's there. Do they go with this, but the bishop he's got three pieces on there? Does he push this pawn up to put another piece on? Shake up the pieces? Don't know, that might not be the way. Oh my gosh, he has done as well. So they are eyeing this up. They're trying to get rid of this, move the knight here. Maybe then the knight's going to take, and then the rook's going to be taking the bishop for free. So it's that type of thing, but the build-up is, as we said, to target this bishop, it looks like. If he doesn't take, he may just squish the queen with the pawn. Small details, nothing magical whatsoever. Have a look at how many people are doing speed runs or whatever it is, you know, the challenge to 2000s and stuff like that. Ordinary folk just coming in and getting to 2000 and 2000 plus. They are not masters in any way, shape. You know, they've just come online and now they're 2000s, 2022, 2200s, you know. So it's just ramping up, and you got, you know, a lot more people who are hitting the 2000s, and they are not masters in chess. Well, looks like anybody can get a 2000. Not just anybody, but you have to put a bit of time in and stuff like that. But still, it's possible for a non-masterish type person to get a 2000 rated level online. So the bishop saved itself. So there's no longer the rook attacking here. Rook in the center of the board's got no place, but it's also on an open file. Now this could get a bit messy. It's probably targeting with the bishop to come through, attack the knight. But this knight is getting on his nerves because he needs to get this knight out of the way, and then this rook is feeling good. So it's kind of giving him what he wants. Knight can come here, but he's got, excuse me, but he's got two pieces defending there at the minute, so he might not want to do that. But maybe he's still going to attack the bishop anyway, see what it's going to do. And then go for this type of thing, but the knight can take the pawn, so they'll have to readjust that somehow. Knight attacks. No, he doesn't go for that yet. He's saving the knight. Yeah, now he goes there. Attacks the bishop. It's really attacking the knight as well. Wants to get rid of the bishop. Bishop goes here to say, oh, no, I'm staying protecting the knight for now. Queen and the knight are protecting, so maybe the knight does actually just move out of the way. If he does that, not that yet, because the queen will take. But the queen can take the pawn here if the knight moves. It definitely just feels like a nice build-up of maneuvers from white. But this is where they can always fall foul of overextending. And like we mentioned, they have holes in their back end as well. Because for every attack, there's some sort of counter-attack. No matter how small the counter-attack, there is potentially a counter-attack. At this moment in time, black looks like they're giving them all the attacking position, white's winning all the tempo at this moment in time in going forward. I'm just looking to see what is the back end problem for white at this moment in time. Only thing I can see is, I mean, there's got dark squared issues here, but nothing's on a dark square to put any pressure on it. Does have like a passed pawn that's ready to just keep pushing down with some sort of support. So they're putting a lot of thought into the knight moving. So I do think the knight's moving here. It could move here as well, just to be more centralized, which could then help support the pawn here. So that might be a better move. Bringing the knight here. It's just the queen can take the pawn, and that's what they're worried about. So for now, he could leave the knight there, couldn't he? Because the bishop is supporting. So maybe the queen's coming and supporting the pawn before the knight moves. Yeah. Don't think it'll go there because it's attacking the rook, but the rook's supported. So maybe here supporting the pawn. Doesn't really like being in front with the queen though, so maybe it's that one. Okay, so the bishop moves. He's not interested in that. We covered that one way back, didn't we? So the knight has actually jumped in. He didn't put any thought into that. Well, he didn't need to. He's used the opponent's time, obviously. So he's looking to just trade down because he's +2. So either move there because he's getting the knight, or he's moved there because there's some fork. And maybe this fork, but just another minor piece. So it's hard to see, but... And he's moved the bishop again. Okay. It's gone for a single attack. As we can see... oh god, and he's taken with a check on the king. I don't know really why the bishop did that move. There could have been more potential teamwork with his pieces, maybe, just to get them working and getting a proper attack going on. As you can see, I mean, this is like, this bishop really is kind of going, isn't it? Because, unless of course he just takes, obviously. And black resigned. Yep. They allowed, like I mentioned earlier on in the descriptor, they basically allowed the opponent, the 2300, to own the time on the board, own the position on the board, and small incremental pressures. That's all they were doing throughout the game. Nothing major, nothing magical, just small incremental little bits of maneuvers. We mentioned some of the things we thought were happening in terms of what advantages they potentially could get because of the position on the board. And really, at the end of the day, the pluses for them are they utilize the basics very, very well. Again, I'm going to say not excellently, because they do fall foul of, as we've said before, being too arty and maybe being a bit reckless with their thought process, being a little bit overconfident, especially playing lower rated players. But when they're on one, they can be really a force to be reckoned with. But they will be willing to take their time on the board and find those appropriate basic positions. Don't let anybody tell you and try and get you all fancied up with, oh, they're doing this because of this, that, and the other, and they're thinking 50 moves ahead and all that sort of stuff. That ain't happening. They're doing one move at a time, nice and steady, basic chess, simple, basic chess, and they do it very, very well. Yep. And if you don't know basic chess, then you're not going to be able to survive very long with them. All the things like simple pinning things, skewers, x-rays, strategical play to really understand what is actually happening on the board. Why are you doing this move? It's to actually take this piece off the board eventually, put pressure on this file, put pressure on this rank. What do the pieces do? What are the purposes of the pieces? Do I have to keep this rook on the board, or should I exchange it? That is the big bone of contention in most chess games of, well, what do I do with this rook? And trying to keep the rook on the board sometimes can cause you a bit of pain. Maybe just get rid of it if it's an even piece exchange, in terms of, not even, but a piece for a piece. Does it improve your position? You should be happy if it does. If keeping that higher piece on the board is not improving your position and you're not willing to get rid of that piece, then you're going to cause yourself problems. The 2000 pluses know this. They'll take advantage of this. They will give up pieces because it might not improve their position. But they may do it, and it can be a bit reckless, and sometimes it is a massive blunder.